Hey guys, Tyler here, and this is the Garage Warrior podcast and video cast, and I'm super excited today to have on the show Sol Orwell. Did I pronounce that right, Sol?
Yep, that works.
Awesome. Sol is a supplement expert, a serial entrepreneur, and a really cool guy. So we're going to learn a lot from Sol today, especially about supplements, because this is something that we're all so confused by. There's so much marketing about it, and we're going to kind of clear the fog on this issue so you guys can know exactly what you should be taking, maybe what you shouldn't be taking, depending on what your particular goals and circumstances are. So before we dig into that, Sol, can you give us a little bit of a background? Like, how did you come to be the supplement expert that you are now?
Yeah, so I've been making websites for now, like 15, 16 years now. And about 6, 7 years ago, I retired. And so I was living around the world, and I was in Argentina where you basically can order delivery online ice cream. Like 2 clicks later, in 10 minutes, they'll bring a liter of dulce de leche con brownie or whatever ice cream. And then I moved to Manhattan, and I literally lived right above a cafe, right? So they'd be baking baked goods, and I'm talking about, this is a storefront, and I was literally right above it. So by the time I came back to Toronto, I had gone for, I'd become pretty heavy. And so as I lost that heaviness, and there's quite a bit of it, I'll show you that photo. I'm pretty sure it's gonna be something else to you. But I'm a very analytical guy, so I started writing everything down when I learned about hormones, ghrelin, leptin, and whatnot. And it's a bit frustrating because there's a lot of smart people on these message boards, on forums, even on Facebook and Reddit and stuff like that. And that information gets lost, right? People talk about some study, you discuss it, and then 1 week later it's gone, right? Nobody's really searching for it, nobody's really looking that information up. And so the reason we created examine.com was we wanted a reference site that would stay around that you could say, hey, you want to know about creatine? Oh, go to that website. Hey, you got a question about saturated fat? Go to the website. So originally, we were supplementation and nutrition, but the reality is that nutrition's it's more dirty. It's hard to be clear about what works and what doesn't work, right? It's like training, right? You get sleep, becomes a factor, diet becomes a factor, experience, the mental aspects, stress, all of it. It's really hard to discern what works and what doesn't. And so naturally, we also started gravitating towards supplementation just because it's a lot more interesting too, right? I mean, the basics of nutrition are pretty simple. So supplementation let us look into, what works, what doesn't work, and there's a lot of garbage around on it,
Sure.
right? I mean, again, this was not meant to be a big moneymaker. We weren't in the supplement business. We have no affiliations with anybody else. And I feel like an old guy, but you start worrying about your legacy and whatnot at my very highly advanced age. So supplements kind of became something we focused more on, and that's kind of how we got our start.
That's awesome. I remember being younger and being influenced by the muscle magazines, and I went into a GNC and I took my whole paycheck from this job manufacturing blinds and I spent it on cell tech and nitro tech and all the muscle stuff. And I remember walking out of there with my good friend who was a training partner at the time. I was fat, he was skinny, and he looked at me and he said, "Man, it sure costs a lot of money to get jacked." Right. And
Yeah.
I'll never forget that story because it was such a deceiving point in my life where I took that stuff. Nothing happened. I followed the training programs. Nothing really happened. And I think that, A, I was young and impatient and wanted things to happen quickly. But B, I was taking like not only stuff that wasn't working that well, but stuff that might not even be good for me at the same time. And so, how do people know where to get started, what they should be doing, what they should not be doing with the supplement industry?
Well, to be honest, and I guess we go back into plugging this, but if you go to our site at examine.com, like you can look up what works and what doesn't work. And the reality is that in terms of muscle building or fat loss, pretty much nothing works. I mean, other than, consistency, eating, calories, those all matter, right? But when you're talking about these other esoteric and exotic supplements and whatnot,
Sure.
they tend not to be beneficial for that kind of stuff.
Right.
I mean, more than anything else, we can talk about what works, right? We can say creatine works. That's without a shadow of doubt. It's good for you. I even make my mom take it. It's got no side effects. It's got more positive effects than just helping you lift more, but it works, right? Caffeine works, but it's something you can't take all the time, right? You gotta take it maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 times a week. Depends on how tolerant you are, how much coffee you have anyway, right? And then you get into stuff like maybe beta-alanine kind of works if you're doing endurance. Glutamine might work if you're really into endurance. But stuff like muscle building and whatnot, I mean, that's pretty much it, right? You want to get into fat burning, unless we're talking about illegal substances. Again, caffeine works, but it works if you're naive to it, right? If you have coffee, or if you're used to it at all, it stops working. Ephedrine, which is basically Broncaid over the counter in the States, it's the same thing, right? You can only take it for a few weeks before it loses its efficacy. So at the end of the day, honestly, the basic parameter should be in terms of, you know, fitness. I'm assuming nothing works, and then you investigate it to see if something has potential to work. But other than the ones I mentioned, you know, they're basically, yeah, in terms of physical fitness, they're basically a waste of money.
Okay, so let's talk like physical fitness real quick. Let's just establish some baseline goals and just figure out from the physical, the vein standpoint, what works best. So if we're talking about muscle building, strength building, our guys in the audience who just want to get stronger, get jacked, what are the top supplements you would recommend for them?
Well, okay, so there's two sides to it. One of it is if everything is squared away, then creatine, and then maybe caffeine, and that's honestly it. Like, you know, caffeine is more for, you know, you're going to go for a PR day, you want to hit a 1 RM, go for it, right? It's something more for the occasional jacked up time. Creatine, again, it always works. You could be a non-responder, but even if you are, it's so cheap and has other effects on it. It's basically self-protective that it's one of those, there's no reason not to take it. And that's why I mentioned my mom takes it, right? More important than anything else is, you know, you got to make sure you're getting enough protein. You got to make sure you're getting enough sleep. Like, it boggles my mind how people go out, they'll get smashed over the weekend, right? They'll get like 5 hours of absolutely garbage sleep. And then they come and ask, hey, you know, what supplement should I take? And it drives me crazy. I don't even have an alarm clock, right? I love my sleep. I go to bed, I wake up whenever I wake up. So, you know, the number one supplement, honestly, is sleep. Like, it
Yeah,
affects
it's
everything.
anabolic.
Yeah, it's fantastic. You know, it's when you rest, your muscles are growing. It's just HGH, everything, right? It's controlled by sleep. But so other than creatine, the other supplements to consider are more based around deficiency, right? So magnesium is pretty hard to get via diet, and it can have a negative impact on your testosterone levels, right? Zinc, especially if you sweat a lot. You know, I'm a pretty hairy dude. I sweat a lot, so I have to take my zinc because you sweat it out. Genetics, right, and all that. So I take a ZMA, and ZMAs aren't that expensive. They're not the cheapest thing in the world, but again, they're not that expensive, right? And the other ones to consider, like vitamin D. I mean, vitamin D, being deficient in vitamin D can also have an impact on your testosterone levels. So, you know, again, it's more of the other side is you got to make sure your deficiencies in your diet are covered. And vitamin D is a hard one, magnesium's a hard one, zinc's a tough one at times. Vitamin K can be a tough one too.
Sure.
But other than that, I mean, yeah, in terms of muscle building and pure aesthetics, consistency and hard work by far, and diet, of course,
Yeah.
by far the most important parts.
Yeah, so people should stop worrying so much about all the fancy woo-woo stuff, and they should really just get their protein in, get their training dialed, get those basic things dialed in, and that's what's really going to give them the results they want, right?
Yeah, I mean, even talking about protein, right? People worry about the post-workout and pre-workout and BCAAs and all that kind of stuff. You know, unless you're a Mr. Olympia athlete and you're worrying about that 0.1%, I mean, it's a waste of effort. It's honestly, you're stressing yourself out, which of course has its own downsides. And so, you know, you could be literally getting that 1% boost from getting your specific BCAA timing down right, but that extra stress is now just pushing you back 5%, right? I mean, you get enough protein, you'll get enough BCAAs.
Yeah.
And in terms of the post-workout, you know, people rush after the gym or they have it ready right next to their bench. They finish the workout, boom, you know, they got the post-workout. And there's absolutely no need for that, right? The anabolic window is like 24 hours long. You can get protein 3-4 hours later and you'll be absolutely fine. I mean, the only time you should even worry about protein timing is if you work out fasted. And even then, we say you should take your protein before you work out because it helps with muscle soreness and, you know, amino acids are then flowing around while you're working out. Other than that, I mean, honestly, and I'm coming from a supplement side, and our perspective of supplements more for health goals and you know, context to what you're doing. But in terms of weightlifting and whatnot, it also honestly boggles our mind how much stress people induce on themselves with this kind of stuff because you don't need it.
So why do you think this is? Is this just because we have a massive marketing machine behind these supplements telling us take these pills, take these powders, and it's just going to make you look, feel, and perform great?